I gotta wait. How long I gotta wait for a press record?
Go.
Welcome to the stand, where Miss Dream always has a story.
I'm Dream, a black woman with many beautiful interconnecting identities. A few I will name at this moment as we get started on this podcast journey together. A Bostonian, born and raised in the inner city, Dorchester and Roxbury neighborhoods, to a teenage single mother who has my whole heart. An educator, I've been working with youth and children since my teenage years, and formally, I have been teaching almost a decade now. That's wild to think about. An entrepreneur, I am the founder of The Chair, a black and brown centered tech platform dedicated to supporting people on their hair journey, where you can design hair boards, connect to hairstylists, and share hair care tips for a more joyous experience. I have a workable site, my prototype. It took me 2 years to build, and now I'm on this adventure that you're currently on with me. My goal for this podcast is to share stories, black stories, educator stories, entrepreneurship stories, and hair stories. I want you to leave each episode with the opportunity to gain new insight, just a glimpse into my world or the worlds that are featured on my podcasts, a little chuckle during your day or night, possibly a little anger to encourage you to advocate for justice, and hope to continue learning and dreaming. So come in and listen to the beautiful voices in the chair as they share their stories, starting with me.
Where we share stories in the chair.
Hello, beautiful people. This is Emily. Emily, can you please introduce yourself?
I would be glad to. I'm Emily Weiner, and I started a company called The Connectors. And I founded this business because I genuinely believe that people can cultivate better skills and competencies and abilities in themselves to better connect to the things they need, whether that's connecting to other people, connecting to new ideas, connecting to different resources, and all of that can help them unlock innovation and impact and all sorts of things in their lives. And so often we run through life engaging in just a bunch of transactions, and I'm here to actually help people cultivate that, go deeper, dig into that true connection so that beautiful things can happen.
When I graduated from business school, people would be like, "Oh, you're now a businesswoman," and I'm like, "What does that mean to me?" Or like what does that mean? Or because I started building The Chair, they're like, "Okay, you are a tech entrepreneur now," and I'm like,
Right.
"Okay." And then when I got the Fulbright, they were like, "You're a Fulbrighter now," and I'm like, "Okay, what do these things mean for me?" And I felt like at the beginning when I was giving these titles, it was more of, okay, I need to be able to say the right thing when I have this title because this is who I am now. But then it became like I had to go through this like stretch and pull, this putty part where because I went to business school and was going to these tech brunches, people were like, "Oh, so you're not an educator anymore?" And I was offended. I was like, "Oh, like, don't take that away from me." But then it was like having this conversation about what is my educator identity. Like the reason why I went to business school was because of my education identity. The reason I started building the tech platform was because I was thinking of identity and blackness in a different way. Like I was thinking of social impact. I applied for a Fulbright to merge my business and my education world together and to be able specifically going to South Africa to talk about identity, right? So it wasn't this pull apart, hey, this is a red apple, this is you now, and an orange, this is you now. It was like, no, I am all of the pieces together. And when you said which ones come to the front more often, depending on who you're talking to, like I think about that a lot. Like I remember I was in South Africa, like I was at my apartment with my roommate. My roommate went up early, so I was behind her and I was like waiting for the elevator. And a white woman came down. She was very aggressive and very rude to me. And she was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, excuse me? Like, I was just like, this is a random Tuesday, like afternoon.
Right.
And she was like, what are you doing here in this country? And I was like, I'm on a Fulbright. And as soon as I said that, when I mean her personality changed, oh my goodness, you're doing so much work. I'm sorry I came across at you like that. Like, you are helping our country to be better. And I was like, wow. Like, after I got on the elevator, I was like, wow, this Fulbright identity is different. I was like, she was angry at my blackness. She was angry at my Americanness because she heard my accent. But then when I said the Fulbright, it presented my whole identity changed for her. She then apologized. But for me, I was like, you shouldn't assume beforehand just because I have this one identity. It doesn't necessarily make me this great savior. It doesn't make me this better person for you to treat me any differently.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it is tough because so many other people make assumptions about our identities.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to cut through that takes time. And most people don't want to put in that time and effort.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, I actually wrote a whole blog post about putting our inherent biases in check. And part of this is actually biology, right? Our brains make shortcuts. Some of those shortcuts are really helpful so that we learn quickly over time. Very little you learn that if you put your hand on a hot stove, it wasn't going to end well. And your brain doesn't need to take up a lot of time processing that information anymore. If you see a hot stove, you know inherently you're not going to put your hand on it, right? Those shortcuts can help you get through life. Unfortunately, sometimes those shortcuts can leave us lacking. And so the shortcut for that woman was, Fulbright. Fulbright equals impressive, and and she put her own list of attributes along with that word Fulbright and shortcut, and didn't bother to actually check in with you on your identity. I'm so curious, as you're talking about all these different identities that you have.
Yeah.
And and I've been there, and I've had other identities. People are like, oh, so wait, you're an events person? I'm always like, no, but people who knew me in my events world still wonder about that. So our identities do evolve and grow and change over time.
Mm-hmm.
But when you got confronted with that idea of not being an educator anymore, and you were like, actually, no, how do you, it's sort of a two-part question.
Okay.
How are you thinking about your own identity right now? And how do you help bring those people along who, and it's going to happen, people will misidentify you.
Yep.
And it's not necessarily bad or malicious in nature. It's just that they might know you as a tech entrepreneur or an educator. They might only know you in one context of that identity.
Yep.
And say, oh, well, this is Dream and she's a tech entrepreneur. And you'd be like, actually, and just everything you explained. So how do you identify, or what are some of the leading parts of your identity right now? And how do you nurture or bring those people along to help them understand how you're identifying?
So I think there's a handful of things that I think about when you ask those questions. One, my blackness will always be front and center, right? And my cisgender womanness, is front and center. I actually think the way I dress, so I'm usually in a colorful suit jacket, jeans, Converses, and rainbow hair. That's like usually my thing. Because I look like that and I'm in a tech space, it confuses people to want to ask questions. Because they're like, hey, I don't see people who look like you in this space. And so bringing them along, I think there's a level of curiosity there on their part. And then on my part, I think the thing is that I'm always trying to like help myself understand and help people understand is that like our interdisciplinary thoughts can also come out in our ventures. And and that's something I had to learn in business school, where when I was in business school, I was like, man, I'm not a business person. But then it was like, can we take that definition apart? What do these frameworks look like? Oh, this language sounds just like my teacher language, but it's a different way of putting it. It's a different way of stacking it. And so for me, it's more being able to be like, hey, all these pieces are a part of me. And currently at this moment, this is what it looks like. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about how I want to deliver the information, because I think that's also helpful, because I didn't know how to talk about going to business school without having to give you the 20-minute explanation beforehand. Like, so being like, I was able to write about it, and that's what got me into the door. But then they're like, tell me in a minute or less, tell me in 5 slides. And I was like, no. And they're like,
Right.
they're like, well, you have to be able to do this. And I felt like it was a good exercise for me to be like, I'm an educator. I'm a Black educator. That is important. I am in business school to look at systemic racism in these ways that affect kids. But because of that, it brought me to interning at the Department of Education as a strategy intern. I took 2-3 strategy classes, and I didn't know strategy was tangible. I always thought it was just something that was in the mind, but I wouldn't have known that if I didn't take business school. Like, I learned that my way of processing and stacking and building curriculum wasn't just a good thing in education, but it was a good thing in planning in terms of organizational management. Again, I didn't have that language before. And so being able to be like, well, it's super intensity when it comes to curiosity and deep diving to look at how kids can be supported in the classroom is also an amazing skill to have when you're building something from scratch and you have your own creative thoughts, because you need all that creativity in the classroom, but you also need all that creativity here. But again, I didn't have any of that language until I went to business school. And then and I feel like for me, that's been my challenge. I think that's why I started building the podcast, right? Because it was, people kept saying to me, Dream, I don't really understand how an educator is now building a tech platform, and your education has nothing to do with like beauty tech. I don't see the connection. And I felt like my 2-minute conversations weren't enough. My 5 slides weren't enough. So building a podcast was able to be like, hey, my world of an educator doesn't disappear. My new world as a tech entrepreneur is just beginning. And there's all these beautiful people that I've met along the way who have tapped me in different ways to make me better. And I want to highlight them because not only do they have different identities that affect what they do, but they also have a hair journey that affects what they do. The white people in my world are also affecting how I've seen myself as an educator. And also, they also have their own journey on whiteness, and that affects the conversations about identity. So all of that is important to highlight simultaneously, but it can be overwhelming. So now let's talk about it like in 30-minute increments for as long as people will listen, So that's a very long-winded answer.
Where we share stories in the chair.
Look, it's my commercial. We will be right back.
It's more than just a bad hair day. It's a journey. Finding the right hairstyle isn't easy, nor is finding the right stylist or the right products. Looking in every corner of the web gets messy, overwhelming, and exhausting. All the ads, the articles, the products, the videos, it shouldn't be this hard, but it is. And now, it isn't. The Chair. A black and brown centered platform where you can design hair boards, connect to hairstylists, and share hair care tips for a new joyful path on your hair journey. Avoid the clutter, save yourself hours, months, and even years of research and poor trial and error. Everything you need and only what you need is in one place. Hair boards made by people like you, for you. Find the right products, the right people, the right answers for you, stress-free. Join The chair. Community and make every day a great hair day. When you share your pain, you allow others to help you. And when you share your success, you help others get theirs. Lean on the chair. We got you. No stress, no strife. In the chair. The chair. The chair. All right.
No, it's a great answer. And it strikes me, I think a lot of people, again, we put things in boxes because that's easier for our brains to process them. And so much, the entirety of your work and everything that you're doing, no matter what it is, no matter what venture it is to say, what box? There is no box, and to sort of smash those and break through all of them. And so I think what's fascinating for me, though, is really good educators, true educators. I'm not just talking about teachers, educators in that bigger sense of the world, not people who just show up, do a job, and leave. But most teachers are really good educators. And those are some of the most entrepreneurial people you will ever meet in your lives because they are seeing the issues in front of them. They're understanding that every student they're working with is on a different path and on a different part of the journey. And they need to constantly evolve and adapt and create and develop and ensure that they're helping that student learn. And so I think it's always fascinating to me when people are like, oh, you were an educator and now you're an entrepreneur. It's like, yeah, but as an educator, you were unbelievably entrepreneurial. Now you're just cultivating more of those skills and more of that language, as you're saying, and all of those other things. You're just expanding upon it by going to business school and then cultivating your own business, whatever. But you don't leave those other skills behind. Everything of this becomes like a snowball that develops large and into the snow person, and you keep growing into bigger and bigger things, but it all stays with you as you do it. It is a tough thing for a lot of people to understand, but I'm so delighted it's a tough thing for people, not just to understand in other people, but to even understand themselves. They segment, oh, well, that was a different life that I lived. Oh, well, no, that was your life. And now those are things that you carry with you and have informed you and brought you to this point where you are now. And you continue to carry those skills and learnings with you.
Yeah, it's impacted how I see things, right? Like I realized through business school that I was minimizing my skill set when I learned, like I will always remember I was in business school and I had to go to the career center and I was talking to all like the career counselors and they were like, you have skills, you're fine. They were like, you have previous degrees. They were like, it's really just being able to have a conversation about how you tell your story. But they were like, I'm not worried about you. And for me, I was so worried about not having the skills, but being able to be like, an educator, a teacher is a product manager, is a program manager, is an organizational manager. Like, here are all these fancy names for all these other things. And I'm like, yes, I've done that. I've done that. I've done that. And they're like, oh, okay, so you're just XXX thing. And I think that has been really interesting to be able to understand as someone who is newly minted in this MBA world.
Yeah. Yeah. It is so interesting because, I spent 16 years in higher ed, but really a little over 11 years in a very student-facing, more integrative role with a lot more students. My first 5 years was more externally facing. And it's interesting for me because I never went and got my MBA. And everyone would say, well, why? You're working in a business school, you can get your MBA for free. Why don't you do it? It was never part of my identity. And it just wasn't, everyone's got a different pathway. I never really wanted to go get my MBA. It just wasn't of interest to me. And also at that point, I was spending so much time working and living and breathing these concepts every day. I just couldn't picture, then also going to school on top of it. My job was pretty all consuming at the time. And it was a challenge for me because my identity inside an academic institution, because I did not have a master's degree, I was seen as less than by faculty. So a colleague of mine had recommended me to teach an undergraduate course. I had, at this point, more than 20 years of expertise. I was better versed in the content than most of the people who were teaching. It's just a 1-credit course, a simple freshman course. And he was told, well, she can't because she doesn't have a master's degree. And he said, are you kidding me? Wow. And in academia, this is actually a really interesting thing. You had asked me when you asked me to come on here how I think about identity and education and all of that. And working in a university environment and not having a master's degree, you're sort of seen as a fraud. You're seen as an interloper. You're seen as someone, oh, yeah, she's really great. She does all this stuff, but yeah, she doesn't have the master's, right? So people would assume things about me. In fact, I think most people assumed I had my master's degree because then a professor after I left reached out and asked if I would be adjunct faculty. And I said, I can't because I don't have a master's degree. And then I never heard from that person again. And so it literally, I would literally get talked down to by faculty and be treated as, sometimes when we were doing programs together, I'd be treated like the help because I was the staff member that was there to support them in their education. And so the messages that I kept receiving from above were, you are not an educator. You are a staff member.
Oh, and if you're interested to learn more about my experiences as a Black woman and educator in Guangzhou, China, I wrote my first ebook titled Nowhere and Everywhere, Captured Emotions of a Beautifully Broken Love Story. It is on lulu.com. Take a read and see some beautiful photography of mine. Enjoy the rest of the show.
You support, because I wasn't allowed, and I found creative ways around this, right? So I would teach in the classroom, but I wasn't the professor. I wasn't the teacher. I was always working with someone who had that master's degree, who could be the professor, so I would team up with my beloved Cheryl. She had the master's degree. So Cheryl and I could tag team and do stuff together, and I could come in and help teach classes where she was listed as the professor. We found workarounds, but as a result of that, the majority of work I did was outside of the classroom because I had total flexibility there and it wasn't subject to the same accreditation rules and requirements, and I didn't have to go through a faculty senate to get approval and all of these things. I could just do whatever I needed to do. And so when you work in a college, it was interesting because I struggled with my identity as an educator. And it really wasn't until I left. I had so many other students who would constantly say, thank you, I've learned so much from you. And I would think of myself as more of a mentor or a guide or other things. And then I was just recently actually talking with a fabulous entrepreneur, a woman from Kenya that I worked on a program with her while I was at Babson, and she's opening her first store in the US in Denver. And so I was chatting with her on the phone recently and talking about how she's a powerhouse entrepreneur. She's amazing. Mutai, if you want to look her up, totally extraordinary, really beautiful brand of bringing Africa to the US, and gorgeous stuff. Anyway, I was talking with her and she said something and I was giving her some feedback, and her response was, always the teacher. Thank you. And I thought, wow, she said, you've always been my teacher. You've always been my guide. And I thought, wow. And then someone else in a conversation said, that's why you were put here. You are a teacher, a guide, an educator. This is what you do. You bring people along, you help them connect to new ideas or do new things. And it's taken me a really long time to embrace that identity of being an educator, even though I spent 16 years in higher ed, because the people above me constantly told me, you don't have the right credentials to be an educator as we define educator. But the people that I was working with, my peers and everybody else, and all of the students were the ones saying to me, you gave me the best education I could have gotten while I was there. And I thought, wow, it's interesting even when I start to think about this, and it just to parallel your story, when other people project your identity onto you, and that sometimes like that happened to me. I had the faculty and other people around me project my own identity onto me. Staff person, less than. And this is a very common thing, unfortunately, in higher ed. And then to then believe it myself and not embrace parts of my own identity until I left that situation and until I started building this business. And I realized, you know what? I am an educator. This is who I am.
Well, Emily, thank you so much for sharing your stories in the chair. I truly, truly appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me. This was the most fun. I treasure you. Thank you for inviting me into the chair. I feel very honored and very special. And you can't see this, but I'm sitting up a little straighter now. And thank you, because I always so value and treasure the opportunity to have a conversation with you. So thank you for being you.
Welcome to the chair, where Miss Dream always has a story.
Thank you for listening to an episode of The Chair. I, of course, would love your continued support. Let me know what you think of this episode by doing all the things. Subscribe, comment, and come back next week, every week. Enjoy the rest of your beautiful day. Or if you are like me, enjoy that moonlight and that one star under all your city lights. Love you. Talk to you later.
The chair.
How long I gotta wait for it to press record?
Go.
We support her. Shit.
Do your...
Welcome to the chair, where Miss Dream always has a story. Where we share stories in the chair.